Okay. So I guess we'll, I'm sorry. All right, this is Pat Troester. It's April 7th, 2014. I'm sitting down with Jim Hooks at the headquarters of the United Steelworkers, Local number 2. Yeah. So I guess we'll start off at the beginning here. So where were you born, Jim?
I was born here in Akron, Ohio.
Okay.
Back in 1948.
All right. Can you tell me what it was like growing up in Akron?
You know, we had 8 kids in our family, and my dad was the only one that worked, and we were poor, but nobody knew it because everybody that we knew were poor. So, but we had a great time. I mean, we had kids we always had a football game or a baseball game or went sled riding, played in the woods. You could go anywhere you want to worry about somebody kidnapping you. And we had a good childhood. Didn't have a lot of money, but we had a good childhood.
Was any of your family in the rubber industry?
Yeah, my dad worked for General Tire. Well, first he worked for American Hard Rubber. I think it was Local 1, URW. And he actually ran for president when I was a little kid. He didn't get elected, but he did run for president of that union. And he wasn't really... after that, he just, he knew what I got interested in. He was interested in it, but he didn't say a whole lot about it, But then he got laid off from there, and he was laid off for a year or two. And he had his own business as TV repairman to make some money, with 8 kids. And so we had some pretty rough times then, but he finally got in at General Tire Research and Development, and he was an instrument man out there and retired from there.
Okay. What about your siblings?
Well, like I said, I've got 7 other brothers and sisters. My oldest brother, I'm the second to the oldest. He was worked for Ryder Dairy, and then Dean Foods bought him, and then another company bought him. He went to Chicago with them for a while, and then he left there, and now he's out in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, working for Waste Management. He's takes care of their fleets all over the country. And he's still working. Why, I don't know, but...
All right. So how did you get started at Goodyear? Or was that your first job in the industry?
In the tire industry, yes.
Okay.
I graduated from high school at Garfield in '66, and me and my buddy got a job at a place called Norca Plating, chrome plating.
Okay.
And
is that in Akron?
Yes, it's right here off the freeway there on Inglewood Avenue. And actually, it's Heritage Fireplace now. It's still there. But I worked there for about a year, and in these bad chemicals and acids, and I said I didn't want to do that. So I'm chrome plating this thing one day. It's a big square thing. It's got little blocks all over it. And I asked the guy, "Who makes this stuff?" He said, "Well, it was a machinist job." I said, "You're kidding me." I said, "I'd like to do that." So I got a chance to get in an apprenticeship, and I left there and went for 3 months down at Howard Trade School, a pre-apprenticeship program through the Youth Opportunity Center. And I worked there for three months in training, math and some on job training. And they placed us in different machine shops. So they placed me at Portage Machine, which at the time was one of the premier machine shops around. I mean, a very high precision stuff, working into the tenths of the thousands. And so I got my apprenticeship almost finished there. In 1970, the economy slowed down, and there was a big layoff. And I was one of the youngest guys that got laid off. So the guy down the street from us, who we run around with his boys, my sisters run around with their daughters, the neighborhood, Frank Fuchs. He was a welder here, and he was active in the union. And he told me, he says, "Hey," he said, "they want machinists to Goodyear." He said, "Go on down there and put your application in." So I went down and put my application in. The guy said, "Well, we're not hiring." So I told Frank that. We called him Butch. And he said, "You go over to Union Hall and talk to Tom Jenkins." He was a division chairman of skilled trades at the time. So I went over and I said, they told me they wouldn't give me a thing to fill out. They said, the guy said he wasn't hiring. He called him up on the phone and just raised hell with him. And back then, that's what they did. And so he said, go on back over there. I went back over there and I filled out an application. And, waited for a couple of weeks and nothing happened. So I called him. He says, oh yeah, he said, we got it here. So I called 3 or 4 different times. Nothing. Well, about a month later, I says, we'll call again. I called again. He goes, oh yeah, he said, I'd like to offer you a job. I forget what, not Wampler. Wampler was one of them down there, but this guy, he was a real jerk. So I went down, and they sent me over to a guy by the name of Smith, who was supervisor over Building 41, which was a huge machine shop. We made tire building machinery, force variation machinery, rebuilt Banburys, everything for Goodyear here and all over the world.
Was that owned by Goodyear?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Goodyear was right behind Plant 1, actually. They tore it down now. We had, at that time, I think we had probably around 600 skilled tradespeople in that building. We had machine welders, we had pipe fitters, electricians, tinners, valve repair, carpenters, painters, every trade you can think of. You could do anything in that plant. But back sometime in the 80s, I forget exactly when it was, they decided they're going to shut it down. I guess somebody was probably getting paid off for these other machine shops, one of these VPs, and sent all the work there because, I forget who it was, said that, and I told you this down to class, that we made these ARF machines, were the state-of-the-art tire building machines. They sent down to Lawton, Oklahoma. And he says, we'll never be another $1 million tire machine made here in Akron. So they sent it down there and cost them $2 million. Found out later. So anyway, that was
your first position then?
Yeah.
All right. And I know you did a number of other ones. Can you briefly run through those and tell me a little bit about them?
Well, when they closed 41 down, and that we had a Stowe mold plant, made all the tire molds for everybody in the world. So I went up there.
When was that? When was that?
That was, I'm thinking it was about 87. Okay. I'm not positive of the date. It's kind of fuzzy now. But we went up there, and I was a machinist, and well, I didn't have enough service to hold first shift, and I had about, I don't know, probably 16, 17 years at the time. So they put me on a back shift. Well, the union got together with the company. They needed bench people, which was a 4-year craft.
Okay. And
they said they would rather give these jobs to machinists and turn off the street, for guys that were laid off, because they laid a bunch of guys off. And so the union got together with the company, and they worked out a deal that the machinist could sign a job to train to be a benchman.
Okay. You know what's a benchman? I'm sorry.
A benchman is a guy a mold finisher.
Okay.
He finishes all the molds after they've been cut. Does the stamping, puts the stamping in them, all the finish work, and stuff like that. We had huge earth mover molds, weighed 7 tons, half of them, and we worked on those, and tire molds.
Okay.
But anyway, I spent 4 years training on that, and just as soon as I could, I left there after about 4 years and went down to the tech center here as in mold repair, and I could hold first shift down there, so I worked down there for, my God, until about 2005 or so, 5 or 6, and they closed down the mold plant. So a bunch of those mold guys with more service than me come down, and I got bumped to third shift. So I worked that for a while, and I got bumped to second shift. Then I worked that for a while. Then another guy come in, I got bumped to third shift. And I was too old at the time. I had about 30-some years service, and I wasn't working third shift. So doing a dumb thing, I signed a job in production down at the mix center. And mix center was the worst place I ever worked in my life. Chemicals, lamp black, dirty, hot. The worst job at Goodyear. That's where everybody started out. So I worked there until I got my learning time in. And there was a job come up at Tech Center for the tuber group. So I signed that job and I got it. And the boss said, well, we're going to have to keep you here for a while.
Keep you where?
Down at the mix center until we get somebody trained. I said, look, so you don't have to train nobody. This job is not rocket science down here. You got to have a strong back and work. I says, you can do that if you want. And I told him straight out, this was the foreman down there. I said, but I ain't going to do no work. I ain't doing a damn thing. He come back a couple hours later and said, hey, you're going back up there Monday. And I wasn't. They could have fired me. I didn't care. I was not staying there. So I went up there and worked in the tuber group, which was extruding rubber, tread for tires, chafer and filler, different things that go into building a tire. And I worked there until I retired in 2007, I guess it was.
Okay, sounds good. Oh, can you walk me through a typical shift?
Where at?
Each of those.
They were all different.
Yeah, well, in each one, I guess. Yeah, for as a machinist.
As a machinist, when I worked at 41, it was really a good place to work. I worked most of the time. For 4 years, I worked on the first floor, and I did a lot of what they call Babbitt bench work. We made lead hammers, for using. They called them Babbitt hammers, and you mixed lead with Babbitt to make hammers out of them. We had a little mold thing we'd pour it in and make these. We did that over there. Sometimes we rebuilt like coal crushers. It was a dirty job, but it was kind of nice because I had a boss that would say, hey, look, you got a coal crusher over there. He says, I don't know what it needs. He says, tear it apart, make what needs to be made, and put it back together. So I was on my own. I pulled a piece out. If it needed to make a piece on the lathe or mill it, I could do that. It was good. It was dirty, but it was good work. So I did that. And I signed a job up 111D, and we made the tire building drums. And these drums are very meticulous. I mean, they are they're made up of spindles about like that, maybe 6 inches, 8 inches, or 6, 7 inches in diameter. Maybe 4 foot long. And they had cylinders in them, and they were quite elaborate. And so anyway, I did that for I don't know, a long time. But anyway, you come in there in the morning, I'd always get in 45 minutes early and sit there and get a cup of coffee and talk to the guys, until the bell rang. We had to go to work, and then I ran a lathe most of the time. Sometime I worked well, at first I ran a lathe. I ran a lathe for a couple of years, and then I got onto the bench to assemble these things, and we assembled them. We'd work, and lunchtime we'd take off, and a bunch of us, we were young at the time, we'd run over the double time and drink as many beers as we could in a half hour, come back, finish out the day. After that, we'd go back over the double time after work, and sometimes we'd never go home. Sometimes we would. It was pretty rough back then. Yeah. But there was a bunch of us, and all the guys we run around with, a lot of them were from Goodyear, and it's just like the one guy down there said, they're your family. I mean, you guys know each other, you play ball together, and I played softball and flag football and all the other different things. Back then we had teams. It was nice. it was work, but after we did leave and they shut the place down, you look back on it and said, boy, that was an awful good place to work.
What about the mold plant?
Well, the mold plant, you go in there and, there's dust everywhere. I mean, from people grinding, drilling aluminum. On the other side where the machinists are, there was a lot of NC and CNC machinery, and they run coolant on it, and the air was just thick with coolant. But it was air conditioned on that side. So we go over there and breaks and lunch, and it was cool because the side I was on, it was just hot. If it was 90 outside, it was 110 in there. Well, maybe 102. And so we, summers were bad. Winters it was a little cold, but that didn't bother me none. But when we first went up there, like I said, I took the training. Well, all the people on the bench, they wouldn't even talk to me. They were mad because, I knocked some of them back off shift because of my service. Some of them guys wouldn't talk to me for 3 years.
Wow.
And about the third year, they start coming around, and we start getting friends, and after that, I had no problem. But I just wanted out. That's the reason I signed out. It wasn't the guys then, but at first it was. They wouldn't help you. There's only a few guys that would help you. And but after a while, they were a funny group up there. You had the machinist and you had the benchman. And back then, you had Bob Bernard was a machinist representative, and Sam Buffington was a bench representative. And they always kept them conflicted for some reason. Why, I don't know. When I got up there, I was friends with everybody. And when I would run for office, I got probably 95% of the votes up there. And, that's saying something. When you come in a place, the guys hate you. And, I was glad of that. But anyway, I left there because it was just noisy and loud. The management was really bad, piss poor. So I went down to the tech center and got into mold repair. And there was only, I think, 5 or 6 of us at the time. And I worked there until, like I say, till they closed the mold plant down, and they bumped down there, and then I went into production. And my last couple of years was in production, and it was hard work, but after getting in the tuber group, it was, you were on your feet most of the time, but a lot of times they had such bad, they brought in kids that were flipping hamburgers and brought them in and put them as bosses. They didn't know what to do. They'd run a batch of 1,000 pounds of rubber that wasn't no damn good because it wasn't supposed to be run, and it just goofy stuff. So a lot of times we'd sit around waiting for them to decide what they want. But then you'd start working when they got it, and you were on your feet all the time. You were working 12 hours, mostly 7 days a week. Actually at Stowe, most of that time. 41, we worked 6 days all the time. But we started working a lot of overtime up at the mold shop, and then down in the mold repair. What we do down there is we get the molds ready to go upstairs. Was a curing room where all your big presses were. So when they were going to run a line of tires, we run race tires, experimental tires, and sometimes we run some of the Hummers for production because some of the other plants couldn't handle them. So I had a couple presses running them.
But most of the production had moved away from this time. Yeah,
most of the production. But we finally got back some of the dirt track tires, which are bias ply racing tires, and we had them for a while. And then they decided to send them down to Chile. Well, we lost a bunch of people, and we filed a grievance because they weren't allowed to do that by contract. It ended up we won the grievance, and we got, I forget, $500,000 paid for them guys. And But anyway, we'd get these molds ready for them, and it'd send them up through a hole in the ceiling on a big crane. It'd pull them up. We'd put eye bolts in them. And sometimes they'd screw up in the presses, and we'd have to go up inside the presses and open vents or fix something that they drop a ring in and ding the side of the mold. Had to be perfectly fixed in order for them to cure a tire, or it'd be showing a tire.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much what we did.
Okay. So what about the infamous mix room?
Well, first thing, I was what they called a utility man. In the morning, I would. They had these big hoppers in this room called. In the hoppers, there's another room next to the hoppers, where these guys compounders. They'd send a order in that they were going to run of rubber, and this was the compound they used. So they had to use so many different chemicals in this compound to mix it right. And they put it in plastic bags, and they take it out to run in the banberries to throw in the batches. Well, my job was to keep them hoppers full. And I mean, they were moving them out too. They had 50, 80-pound bags of chemicals. Every one of them had skulls and crossbones on them. They said it was all safe. Yeah, no problem. So for about the first 3 or 4 hours, that's what I did in the morning. Filled them up. Then after that, I had to go upstairs and relieve the guy that dumps the lamp black upstairs. They had huge 1,000-pound bags of lamp black up on the top floor. And these guys would have to take these bags, and they had a chain hoist and a tow motor to move them over and hang them up there, and then when the Banbury called for it, they could pull a lever and put so much of that lamp black into the mix. So I had to do that usually till the guy was done with lunch, and then I'd have to go check all the scales. Had standard scales to check and make sure they were all, so when they weigh this stuff, they got the exact amount. And oh, hi, Jimmy.
Did you get that check off?
No, I didn't. He's the president here now. He's got an old check off in there that they use for checking off the dues. Actually, I haven't really looked at it good. But then after that, I'd have to go downstairs and they had different guys on the Banberries, and you had to relieve them because they were taking their lunch or their break. Is that it?
Yeah. You know Vic Flesher?
I don't.
No. All right, I'll get a hold of him.
Who's
The original dues checkoff.
Okay, yeah, I seen part of it.
That guy from University of Akron. I just figured you knew.
Are you going to give it to him?
Yeah, he said he'll hold on to it for us. If anybody wants to look at it up there.
Was that the archivist?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, what wasn't? He needs context too.
Vic Flesher. It's our original dues checkoff. It was when they formed the union.
Oh, I think they'd be thrilled to have that.
Yeah, I talked to him. I just haven't been up there. Anything from me, Jimmy?
Pardon me?
Anything from me?
I don't think so, Jimmy. If I do, I'll yell for you. Where was I at? Okay.
I don't remember either.
We'd relieve the Banberries, and so I'd run the Banberries for, guy was on break for 15 minutes. I'd run this one, then I'd go to the next one, run it, and then I'd go run, because I had to learn how to run all them different Banberries.
How many were there?
There was 4.
Okay.
One was an automatic. It was a little easier to run. The other one you had to dump everything yourself. And they bring in crude rubber, which, in fact, that's right, I relieved the guys that made up the rubber. They bring in big hunks of rubber, and you'd have to cut it up, and for each speck, and put it in weight. You have to cut it and weigh it, and have so many pounds on this belt. They had a big belt there. You'd set it on there, and as a batch at a time, there'd be like, a thing of natural rubber and some different type of big rubber, and you'd cut them out, and then so many pounds of it, and then so many bags with different chemicals on that belt, and as it would go through, they would dump it in the banberries, each batch separately. And a banberry was a big mixer. And they had a TV up on there, and it was your job. There's a guy down underneath there where we dropped this rubber down on, a big mill. This mill got rolls on it like this here, 2 of them. It brings that rubber down, it keeps running it through under heat. And you gotta make sure that guy don't get in that mill. I mean, you know, I don't know why. There's nothing I can do but say I could hit the kill switch, but it'd be too late anyway. And so anyway, I'd do that. Then I'd go to lunch and come back, and then I'd have to go down underneath the banberries while they're running. Dirty, hot, and they had big bearings in there, and they'd heat up. And you had to take this solution and cool them down with it. There's one on each side of each banberry. And then you have to scrape all that excess rubber in there and get it out so that it doesn't build up and get into the banberry.
That's while it's still running.
Yes, while it's still running. Yeah, it was scary.
Yeah.
And then they leaked. Leaks everywhere, and they wouldn't fix them. So when I was there, I set up a thing got some tubing, and when they were leaking, I run tubes over into buckets. So some of them buckets would fill up in a couple hours, some couple days, but at least it wasn't all over the floor.
Yeah.
And I never could get them to fix it, but that was probably the worst part of the job. I mean, you were down there for maybe 2 hours. You were in a complete suit. I made them get me complete face mask with the respirator. And it's hot. It was in the summer, 90 degrees there, and God knows what down there. And after that, then I'd have to clean up one area there. They'd throw pallets in and stuff, take it out in a compactor. That was a typical day down there.
All right. Well, I think that's all of them, right? Going through the various positions here. You've spoken a little bit to this already, but what was the relationship between the workers and the managers and among the workers?
Well, back in the 70s, it was pretty conversational. They were management and we were union. And we pretty much conflicted. I mean, I was representative when I hired in. I got elected, a guy appointed me a committeeman, which is underneath the rep. If the rep's on vacation, I take over for him. Well, I did that for 6 months, and then elections come up, and they wanted me to run for rep, so I ran for rep, and I was elected rep. And so I had to be the go-between between the guys and the company. And back then, I mean, I'd go in and they'd do something, and I'd have to go in and tell them, look, you guys can't do this. Well, then they start getting on me. And they say, well, damn it, you can do this and you do that. I said, look, I didn't come on here about me. I said, if you want to talk to me about a problem you got with me, I'll call my representative over to Union Hall. We'll sit down and we'll have a meeting right here. Well, that shut them up pretty much. They just wanted to get you off the subject. And that's just the way they were. They were anti-union. They didn't like most of them. Now, there were some good bosses, don't get me wrong. But the two they had, shop foreman and his assistant, were pretty bad. I won't mention any names. But and then I worked there for about 4 years on second shift. And
Now, which location was this?
Building 41.
Okay.
This is a machine shop. And, back then the union really had a lot of power. If I had a problem and I couldn't get it fixed, I'd go up and talk to the superintendent. Smith was his name. And, if he wouldn't do it, well, I'd call the union hall and get somebody over there. And they really didn't want that. So a lot of the stuff we handled, we didn't have to file grievances. We'd go into meetings and we'd get it taken care of. But sometimes you couldn't do it. But then as the years went on and on and on, and we got to Stowe. Stowe was bad too. But later on, 41, we pretty much had everything smoothed out. We'd have some problems. A lot of the problems were guys not coming to work. And, like I said, after 4 years, I went upstairs and worked in a building drums in 111D. And we had a boss up there, the shift foreman, was a decent guy to work with. So, he'd bend over backwards with these guys. They'd come in drunk, get them in the back here and keep them out of sight. Back then, it wasn't a big deal, guys drinking. It just wasn't. Christmas time, there'd be bottles all over the place, But and the last day we worked before Christmas, they pretty much lenient on there. But it was, I represented probably, I don't know, maybe 100, 150 guys, plus I had all the apprentices. I think there was maybe 40, 50 apprentices, so I represented them, and I'd have to go to meetings, they'd have grades every month, and they'd sit them down and say, well, you're doing this. So there was a lot of meetings involved, and in the meantime, I'd work, but I'd be sitting there working on something, and somebody get in a fight, and you got to go back there, and since, you try to hush it up, but guys start talking, and it gets upstairs, and then boom, they fire both of them. So we'd have to go through the grievance procedure and get them back, And sometimes we had guys that, I'll tell you what, back in the 70s that would miss 60, 70 days of work. Drunks, didn't want to work. And they got them back. They'd bring them back in the last chance letter. They'd screw it up again. And at Nardella, we'd go back over there and he'd get them back in another last chance letter. I mean, it was amazing, But as the years went on, that pretty much went away. If you didn't want to work, and I told the guys, look, this is a job. If you don't want to work, quit. Because there ain't much I can do for you if you keep missing work. I said, you get step 1 is a verbal warning. Step 2 is a written warning. Step 3, they call you in the office. Step 4, they're going to fire you. You're at step 4. And I said, we can file a grievance and take it to arbitration, but doesn't mean you're going to get back. So you do what you want to do. If you don't want to work, don't. You had to talk to some of these guys. And you were in between. You were fighting sometimes the guys themselves. You were fighting the company. A lot of times we had about 6, 7 guys in the back that were die cast people. We had die cast machines, and we injected spacers for the tire building drums, and that's what they did. But they weren't machinists. They weren't. They were in a class of their own. Well, things got slow, and they were going to lay these guys off. And what would happen is they'd die cast these things, and we'd take it over on the bench, and the machinists, they would drill them and tap them put tap locks in them. It was a pretty simple job. So I went over to Union Hall and told us, our boss wants to work out see if we can give these guys some of that work to keep them working so they don't have to lay them off. Well, all these guys start raising hell. I said, look, so we got a big meeting. I said, look, guys, we're gonna let these guys do it on a temporary basis, just until stuff picks up. It just sticks in my head. And I says, well, you got to make sure they can't go back later and say that's their work. I said, nope, got it written right in the agreement that it will remain a machinist's job on a temporary basis. We'll let these do it 90 days at a time, renewable. And that's what we did, and we kept them working. So we worked, we could work together sometimes.
You guys were really attached to their particular specialty or their particular.
Oh yeah, they were
job.
very, very. You didn't like a pipe fitter. Didn't unhook a electrician. Didn't take a pipe apart. I mean, just as soon as somebody seen that, they'd boom, get a grievance. It was work rules is what it was. Most of them knew it. And the good supervisors, they'd say, hey, go do this job. You need an electrician, pipe fitter, mechanic. Go do it. And they'd work together and do it.
All right. Well, kind of shifting gears a little bit, can you tell me about your social life inside and outside of work, and what role did the company play?
Well, I was single. I was single until I was 33, I think. So, I run around a lot. Run around with the guys at work. We played ball, morning league when I was on night shift. And so we'd go play ball when we got off work and get done 10, 11, 12 o'clock, and then we'd head for the bar and drink beer. I was very active in the union, so I spent a lot of time over to Union Hall. We'd have a lot of union functions. We'd have New Year's Eve, we'd have a big dance. We always have a picnic, either at, they first started out at Chippewa Lake, Myers Lake, Euclid Beach, place out in Youngstown. And today we still have a picnic, but it's not quite as big. But, I was always active in that stuff. And pretty much, what we did was, we got off work, we drank and chased women. That's just what I did. I know every payday now, when we were working second shift, there was probably about 8 of us. And we'd all get off at midnight, and we'd go down to a bar down here at Sam's, and everybody get their check cashed. We'd drink a few beers, and we'd jump in a guy's van, and we'd start hitting all the gin mills around, Every Thursday we did that. I don't know, that's pretty much what we did back then.
Yeah. Okay, so you were a very active union member. How did you first get involved, or get involved?
That's so vivid in my mind. A guy by the name of K.C. Hicks, he was a representative down there. We got talking about what was going on, and I said, well, why are they doing that? He says, because there's guys that go to the union meetings, they decided to do this, and they don't know that it's going to hurt us. Well, I said, well, why don't you guys go to the union meeting? Well, nobody wanted to go to union meetings. So he said, we'll go. I said, I will. So I went to every union meeting. Well, then I got elected.
This was when you were at 41?
Yes. Elected president, and I was only probably 22, 23. You got going there, and like I said, this John Nardella, he had a machine. I mean, you had committees. You had entertainment committee. You had a committee that wrote the union paper, different committees. You had conventions you went to, and he could appoint people to all these.
What was his title?
He was the president of the union.
Okay.
And so, you support him at the union meetings and stuff, and you got to go be on the picnic committee. Well, hell, you may be off 6 weeks on that picnic committee, not have to work. So you get these guys that really didn't do nothing. And, we seen it now. They said, why don't you get some decent people on there? Guys that are going to work, not guys that are just drinking all the time. And other guys in different shops, they knew what was going on. So a guy by the name of John Melmar, he was a college graduate, he worked out at the rim plant in the boring mills, decided he was going to run for vice president. And you really could not get elected unless you ran on that Nardella ticket. He had a big ticket called the pumpkin ticket. And I probably have some old, I should have brought them. I've got some old literature of the elections. And if you were on that ticket, you're automatically going to get 4,000 votes. Boom, right there. Just because you're on it. Them loyal people that, you had a lot of guys that weren't too smart. They did production work. Nardella, by God, they had badges on, Nardella badges. So I run independent. I never did run with him because I didn't like his politics. So he was going to run, and I decided I'm going to support the guy. So we got him elected. He beat a guy that had been in there for years, and that was amazing. That just never happened. It just woke everybody up over at that hall. They couldn't believe it. So he got in there, and he spent 4 years in there. Well, they always kept trying to get him to run on their ticket with them, you know. So right at the end, he almost did it. He said, no. He said, I'm going to run for president. So we had a bunch of young kids, and we supported them. We wrote up literature. Well, he said, but I need some guys to run for the board and stuff. He says, how about running for the board? I said, I don't really want to. I don't know nothing about it. He said, you run for the board. I said, okay. So I had tickets made up and ran for the board.
Oh.
Hey, did you see that?
Yeah, I got it right here.
I'll tell you about it. Are you going to be around for a while?
A little bit. You know the guy?
Yeah, it's a good friend of Sandy's.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
Where was I at now? Oh, running for the board. And I says, okay, I'll run for the board. And I had these cards made up, and I started going into the shop. You had to campaign. Well, there was 8,600 members at the time in all these different plants. You had the stove plant, you had plant 1, you had the chemical plant, plant 2, the rim plant, the skunk plant, I can't think of what it was. Skunk plant, you had the warehouse, you had a couple other plants, Greensburg and stuff. So you had to hit 8,700 guys on three shifts. I went into plant one time, didn't come out for 2 days. Constant campaigning. Well, John didn't get elected. He almost beat Nardella. He lost by about 100 votes. But I picked up a bunch of votes. And these guys seen that, and they said, whoa. So now they're trying to get me to get on their ticket. I never did. The whole time John was there. Eventually, years later, I got to admit, he was bad politics, but he did a lot for the union. He was a good union man. But that's how I first started getting into it. And then the next election, I got elected. No, I did not get elected to the board. What happened was somebody retired on the board, and they were going to fill the spot. And so that first election, we got a couple guys on the board, a guy by the name of Carmen Davis and somebody else. Well, he told him he wanted me to get that board spot. And there was a couple other guys on the board, maybe 3 or 4 that would support that. But it wasn't enough to cover Nardella's people. Well, one of his supporters, who was Secretary Treasurer, Tom Hemsley, wanted this Charlie Yost to get it. Nardella and some of the guys didn't want him to get it. Well, they wouldn't go with him. So Tom and his son, Craig, who just died this week, called me up one night and says, hey, do you want that board spot? And, I'm thinking, what are they trying to pull? Because they just didn't do that. And I didn't believe him. I thought he was bullshit. He said, no. He says, if you want it, my dad said, we'll support you and we'll have the votes. So I says, okay. So I got appointed to the board. And after that, I ran for re-election, and I got elected most of the time. All the time, in fact. But that's how it started. And then I became a board member when we were over at the old Union Hall. It was the old theater over here, right across from Plant 1. I might have a picture of that somewhere. And then we built this place, and we come over here. I actually, right before I retired, I ran for president and got beat by a guy by the name of Pete Stamage. But it was a heck of a ride.
Okay. So what was your first indication that the industry was changing? I mean, I know you kind of came in towards, right before everything sort of started.
Probably back in like 85. You could see after they took all the production out of Plant 1, or Plant 2, and we could see that they started up a all salary plant down in Lawton, Oklahoma, and so handwriting's on the wall. They kept little by little getting rid of production here in Akron, sending it down south, and it was it was a bad feeling. You see guys that you've known for years, and they're out on the street. And some of them maybe they'd get back in, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years they waited. They got hired, called back finally. And your service went on years after you got laid off, but after that you start losing service. And a lot of guys lost a lot of service. They come back in, they lost 5, 6 years service, But back then, I'd say it started, and then all of a sudden they decided they're going to build the tech center over there, which was going to save some jobs. And boy, we thought, man, maybe this is a big thing. We'll get them to build a plant here. Well, this John Nardella, John Melmar, who was vice president at the time, you probably don't know Dorothy Foldheim. You ever hear of that? Okay. She was a commentator on one of the TV stations. Every night she would have people in there. But John went up to Cleveland, got on that show, and made Goodyear a proposal right on air that if you build a tire plant in Akron, we'll take 50 cents or $1 cut in pay. And boy, the rest of the Nardella ticket, they were like, who the heck do you think he is? But he was trying to do something to get some jobs back here. Well, it came out in the paper, says a little premature on that. They just blew it. So that was about the last thing he tried to do. And then he finally quit and went to Motor Wheel and worked up in Michigan. But is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Yeah. So how did the strikes in the 70s affect things?
But it affected a lot of people, a lot worse than me, because I was single. I had a little bit of money in the bank. I was going to buy a boat. I was saving up for a boat, and I lived out of a little house out at the lakes. And I was down at the Union Hall that night. Now, that was in 1976. And yeah, I don't think I was on the board then, but they were all waiting for him to call in down in Cincinnati, because they were all down in Cincinnati negotiating, and we didn't know whether we were going on strike or not. So we're all in the office sitting there, and I'm laying on the floor and almost asleep. And I pretend I'm asleep. They called up there and put it on a speakerphone, and I heard everything that was going on. They just didn't. They let me be in there. I don't know why. And I told him, he says, we'll pull them out. So we went out. They pulled us out. They made me a gate captain. So when we first started, we had put up tents. We had to get barrels. We had a bunch of stuff at the Union Hall waiting. So every gatehouse we had to cover, every one of them. So we started the first day. It was in the morning, all night long. We stayed there, and salaries started coming in the morning, and we wouldn't let them cross the gate. So we held them out for a couple of days. We had back in Building 41. You got off the freeway and you turned down and you could come in there. Well, I took my van and I put it on the intersection crossways, stopped the traffic. We had traffic backed up the whole way up on the freeway. All Market Street backed up. We weren't letting nobody even get in. Well, cops come in and they said, what's wrong with that truck? I said, I don't know. I said, I think the wiggle arm fell out of the wobble bearing. I said, it won't start. So we finally had to move it. And we moved it, but we actually had people at every gate standing chest to chest. So people couldn't get in there. And first day or two, we kept them out. It took about 3 days. They got an injunction. I remember Judge. Shoot. I can't think of his name now. But the judge wrote the injunction. And so we had to start letting them come in the gates. So we did. And the biggest thing in that strike was the cost of living. Inflation was going crazy at the time. We weren't getting no raises. We had to get a cost of living raise. So Bomarito took them all out. You've ever heard of Pete Bomarito? He was an international president. I knew Pete fairly well. And he pulled them all out, except for General Tire. Their contract didn't run up for 2 more weeks. And Matt, no, not Matt. Actually, it's my wife's cousin. I can't think of his name. Nate Troester. Nate Troester was president. So he was actually, I was involved with international politics too, through the international conventions. And so I knew everybody at international. And Nate was being groomed to take over when Pete retired. I mean, and man, he seemed like a really decent guy. He was a younger guy, older than me, but younger. Well, come down 2 weeks, Nate wouldn't pull him out. Apparently the company offered him what they offered to build a plant there if he kept him working. Well, everybody was hot about that. I mean, everybody. So we went out there, and we blocked the trains from coming in, blocked the main gate, the general. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. That was after that. First, what we did was after they got the injunction, well, it was probably a week or 2 went by, we decided we're going to stop the coal trucks from coming into Plant 2. If we could shut the powerhouse down, they couldn't do nothing in there. So we did that. We had, my God, I don't know how many guys. And I've got pictures of the beacon. They had pictures of us sitting in front of there. And here they brought buses in, and I don't know, every cop in Akron. And they were going to break us up. So we sat down and locked arms. And we sat there, and they started coming in. Look, you know, I mean, they really were on our side, but they had to do what they had to do. And we sat there till the last minute, and kept talking to them. He said, well, guys, he said, we got to break this up. He says, so he called his guys, and they started coming in on us. And I says, okay, guys, let's get on the bus. So we all got on the bus, and they're taking us down to jail. And it's a big city bus. I know. Yeah, we'd been out all night. A lot of guys were drunk, smoking pot. They start rocking that bus. And this cop's up in the front. And they had the wheels off the back. I said, wait, hold it, you're going to turn this damn thing over. So they stopped. Because I was the gate captain, see. And they took us down, and it's all in the drunk tank. There were so many of us, the whole 50-some of us on that bus. So we got in down there. And boy, that was the filthiest thing I've ever been in my life. So we, next morning, Nardella come down, went and got Judge Parker, I think. We had to go in front of Parker. So they brought us in there, and we're in there. They called us up, I think, 2 at a time or something. Said, oh, Mr. Hooks, he says, you're to get out of here and stay away from the picket line. You're not allowed on that picket line. I said, me? I'm going back to the picket line. Oh, John grabbed me. He said, shut up, just do what he says. So they were arguing it, and I grabbed his gavel. I still got his gavel to this day at home. I just seen it, in fact, a couple months ago. And I got that gavel, and they finally let us go. So I got out. Somebody picked us up, took us back to Union Hall. We grabbed our sign and went right back to picket line. So there was two cops, Oldacre and another one that were in charge, detectives were in charge of the strike to make sure we let people in and didn't break the injunction. Well, we get down there and Oldacre and them come in, and I had to run because they were going to throw me in a can if they caught me there, so I left. So a few days later, we decided we're going to go over to General Tire and we're going to block the main gate. So we get over there and the train's coming through. We sat right down on the tracks. I had that train from here to that desk from me before it stopped. I was getting ready to bail out, but it stopped. And I had a monster mask on because I wasn't allowed to be there. And so we stopped it, stopped them for a while, and then they broke us up. So we decided we're going to go down to Firestone. We're going to block them. So we get down there, and I called my buddies because I went to school with some that worked at Firestone. I said, you get all your guys together, we're going to have a big protest down there at Firestone. So he gets down there, and Oldacre spotted me. He says, Hooks, get your ass out of here before I got to throw you in jail. I mean, they were, nice. So my buddy, he was there. He says, go ahead. He said, run. He said, so they took them to jail. And they went down, did the same thing, and they got out. But that was pretty much what happened. We were out for close to 4 months. A lot of the guys, I think we got 2 weeks of strike benefits, which was about $25 a week. After that, you're on your own. I helped my brother do some roofing to make a little money, and everybody tried to get a job to do something, especially the guys with families. We helped them. The union got jobs and got people to, got them working where they could earn a little money. So anyway, they finally decided they're going to settle this strike, and they had a tentative. So back then they'd hold the ratification meetings down in the Akron Armory. My God, there's thousands of people come in there. So they passed it, and the strike was over. We went back to work, but that was really the big one.
Yeah. So were there tensions in between the strikes?
After, yeah, there was. I mean, after, when you first got back, especially, you had people, nobody crossed the picket line back. Nobody. But you had salary people that, go in like they'd cross the line and say, yeah, well, I'm going in to make money, and you're out here not making any, jerks. But you had salary people, when we take collections up, they'd give us money. Actually, a lot of them did. And they knew whatever that we got, they were going to get. Because that's what the company did in order to keep the salary people from being unionized. So they knew it was good for them. So they did. A lot of them helped us. A lot of them were jerks. But then later on, our last strike was, when was that? Probably 2006. We were out for...
Yeah, late 90s or...
No. We were out for, let's see, how long were we out? I think we were out for a month or two in 2006, I'm thinking. And because we had built a shanty, we were gonna, it was getting cold, and we wanted to have some place to get in, and that was when they wanted to get rid of Tyler, Texas plant. And we were trying to hold out to keep that plant working, and we ended up losing it. And we had 2 guys cross the picket line. Well, if I ever had a chance, let's put it that way. But that was never, ever done before. But you had a lot of young kids in there, and I'll tell you, there was a lot of talk about going back in. And we held them out, all but 2. But, I don't think you'll ever see another strike.
Yeah. But it was just a different culture. They didn't,
They
weren't raised
were,
in that.
They weren't raised in it. They don't understand it. It was a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I think now, even the colleges, I don't think most college kids now don't know nothing about the union and don't support them. I would guess. I may be wrong, but that's the way I look at it. And that's too bad, because look and see what our economy is today. It's because we've lost them jobs. They're all in India. They're all in China. They've taken them out of here. They've tore the buildings down. They're not coming back. What's a kid to do that's not smart enough to go to college? You're going to be out there selling dope. That's the only thing you can do. He can't get a job. Hell, they got guys with master's degrees building tires in here. It's because we lost our middle class. And the union was the only thing that brought the middle class up there. And not only union guys, but any worker. Because if we made money, these other outside shops that supported them had to give their people raises too. So it was good for everybody. But it's kind of a sad thing now. I come down here sometimes and hear what's going on in there, and I come in a good mood and I leave mad. But times are changing, I guess.
So what do you see as the main causes behind the industry leaving Akron?
Hey, Jeremy, how you doing?
How you doing?
Good. Well, years ago it was because they could get cheaper labor done down south. Work rule restrictions. But later on we got rid of most of those. But by the time we did that, it was cheaper to make tires in China. So that's where they're going. I could see Goodyear eventually not having maybe one or two plants here in the United States, and if they want 100,000 tires for here, they're going to call China up and say, I want 100,000 tires shipped over there. Call India up, I want 100,000 shipped over there. I don't see it ever coming back.
How did that affect your own work life? I mean, you stayed in the industry well after the main thrust of it left.
Well, I was lucky, yeah. I was a skilled trades, and they needed us. And so I held on. I was lucky enough to get in at the right time and to retire at the right time. Kids nowadays aren't going to have that opportunity, and it's sad, really sad. Just like Jeremy just come in there. He's got 16 years service. Well, it's going to be, I don't know what they're going to do over here. It wouldn't be surprised me they move race tires down south somewhere. Whether they will or not, I hope they don't do it, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. So what do? You're a kid that age and lose your job after 20 years service. You don't have enough to retire. You got to go out in this job market. Well, some of these kids are pretty sharp. They'll make out, but a lot of the guys in there that are, some of them maybe didn't finish high school. They're out of luck.
All right. So the last thing I've got on here is what do you think are the most important lessons or legacies of the tire industry in Akron?
The important legacy?
Legacy and lessons, or legacy
Lessons?
Lessons.
Well, to me, the union is the biggest legacy. I mean, the things that these people did back in the 30s was amazing. They were beat up, they were shot, some of them killed, and you can't let that. I can't let it go. I mean, I know you're going to have to, but I don't have to. There was a voice for the working man, and the only way you're going to change our government is through two things, I think. It's either going to be the unions or the churches or the colleges. I take that back, colleges. Those three big organizations is the only way you can get our government to do something. And they have got to stop sending these jobs overseas. They've got to start bringing them back. Well, they say it's going to happen, but I don't see it. I think that is the big thing that the unions have to focus on now, is trying to get jobs back in. We're working with the company now. I mean, all these guys are. It's a lot changed since the 70s and before. We're trying to work with the company to get stuff out, to make it productive. And the union's bending over backwards to do it. Not only here, but in our other plants. Gadsden, Alabama. Well, they just shut Gadsden down. I guess no, Gadsden's still working. They shut Union City, Tennessee down. But you got the truck tire plant in Virginia, Danville. Kelly plant up in South Carolina or North Carolina. My God, I don't know where the other plants at. But they're making changes to work with the company to try to keep jobs here. But when they get their mind made up to ship jobs out there, it doesn't matter. If they can get it for a dime cheaper, they're going that way. But I think the biggest legacy of the tire industry is the unions. I mean, if it wasn't for the unions, there would never be a good job here. You'd be working for $2 an hour to this day. I don't know whether that's what you want.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And then, you think there are any lessons for the city, for the country?
Yeah, I think they see now that the masses, the millions of the people that don't have jobs. Why? Because they've moved our industry out. I mean, people should be up in arms about this, saying, look, bring them damn jobs back. There's people, the damn Republicans, they don't even give a guy that's unemployed his unemployment benefits. They want to take that away from him, and that's boom, man. We need to change our government in order to change this country. And, I'm a diehard Democrat. I'm probably an independent Democrat, let's put it that way. I used to vote for some Republicans. I will not vote for any Republican anymore. I have never been so distrustful of anybody in my life as that bunch they got in there now. They won't want to work together. All they want to do, and all the politicians, probably on both sides, they're worrying about themselves and not this country. And what we need is the Tea Party's not the answer. It's a Labor Party. We need to get people in there that's maybe a student, maybe a butcher, maybe a mechanic, an engineer, a baker, somebody that's going to go down there and take care of business and not play this politics, because what they're doing is these PACs and these billionaires are putting so much money into these political people's hands that they've got to do exactly what they say, because it costs so much to run for the Senate or the House. And that needs to be stopped. Yeah. And what, they just changed it now that they can put unlimited amounts of money in there. And the people in this country are saying nothing about it. Yeah. That's not right.
There's no organizing voice to focus that.
No, and we need a central organizing voice. And like I said, it's either got to be the churches, which are not, because all they're cared about is abortion. The unions are the ones that's going to have to do it. And the AFL-CIO, they may be good in their time, but God darn, they got to start doing something. Yeah. That's just my feelings. So, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Well, that exhausts my questions here. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, but I just wish maybe you'd let some of the younger generation know that the union's a good thing. It's not an evil thing that a lot of people preach. At one time, yeah, it was probably a little overkill. But if you don't have anybody speaking for you, the companies are going to run over you. I mean, not all of them. There's a few good ones, but the majority of them will. Yeah. And that's pretty much my feelings.
All right.
Even though I sugarcoated it.
All right, Jim. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.